What's up, YouTube? Damon, Dialysis Dude here again. Do some Q&A about my life on dialysis. I've been on dialysis for about 15 years, so sometimes it's a little bit hard for me to remember what it was like before or remember what normal people know about kidneys and dialysis and stuff, which, if I remember correctly, it's pretty much nothing. I mean, I didn't know anything before I had kidney failure. So these questions come from a friend of mine on Facebook. So I'm just going to go through the questions that she asked and give my best answers. So what symptoms led you to realize that you had kidney disease? Well, I didn't know that I had kidney disease until I was like almost dead. I was pretty much blind or going blind. I had a blind spot in both eyes to where I couldn't really see faces anymore, and the whole world was starting to really get fuzzy, almost like after you get out of swimming in a chlorine pool and opening your eyes too much and things are just like fuzzing out and you can't really see. I couldn't hear very well and I couldn't speak very well at that point. I was extremely far gone. I first got sick at about 18, I think, and then it was 26, 27, somewhere in there when my kidneys fully failed. So I just, growing up in the community that doesn't go to the hospital or go to the doctor unless it's really an emergency, I would go in and they'd test me for STDs and other things and say I had the flu. Symptoms that people should be aware of is swelling in the hands and feet and face. Like if you wake up one day and your pants just don't fit all of a sudden, like you have extreme fluctuations in weight, nausea, color in your urine, fluctuations in energy, just really getting super tired at times. In general, though, it's pretty hard to self-diagnose. Like, you should definitely get some urine tests or something if you're a little concerned about your kidneys. It really shouldn't be too hard to find. I'm a rare case that I lived in Mendocino County in areas that do not have as modern hospitals, and they didn't catch it until I went down to Santa Cruz. Yeah, so that's kind of the beginning story for me. All right, next question. How has living with kidney failure impacted your quality of life and your ability to continue activities you engage in pre-kidney failure? Oh, yeah, I need to do a cat hug for that one. Yeah, everything. I mean, first off, there's like, I spend about 40 hours a week doing dialysis, and dialysis is life. Without dialysis, there is no life. So it is first and foremost, I have to prioritize pretty much everything around my diet and my health around dialysis. And then things are second, in truth. I tell other dialysis patients you need to have hobbies and a life other than dialysis, and it is important to have things to maintain, and I still try to go surfing, I try to do things, but I mean, my fluid levels affect how my lungs are. If I'm holding fluid, it'll build up on my heart and my lungs, and I can't breathe right, so then I can't go surfing. Kidneys control how your bone marrow talks to your body and have the hormones that control what blood cells you make. So I get some drugs to help produce more red blood cells, but it's always a little bit of a struggle. I have to maintain protein count so I can get anemic, and I just can't do much of what, I mean, it's just not even in comparison. I just do what I can now. I mean, for me, it's also been 15 years between my late 20s and early 40s now, so I'm definitely slowing down. But for me, I was very physical, and before dialysis, I could do double backflips for a while in my late teens, early 20s, and then dialysis hit, and all of a sudden I couldn't walk. Like, not barely walk, but I couldn't walk, basically. No, I guess that's not true. I always stumbled along. Like, I've been put in the wheelchair a couple times when they make me, and I've been put in the bed, but I'm always real stubborn about that. I'm always grumpy about that. So I guess I've always been able to walk to some extent. But to go from being able to do flips to stumbling around is a huge difference. Dialysis Q&A here. What is the dialysis process like? What happens during dialysis, and how do you feel before and after? Oh, it's a pretty in-depth question. It's hard to explain exactly what the dialysis process is like. There's a lot to it. Like, there's a lot of subtle things that are hard to explain once you walk in the clinic. I mean, if you're in clinic, there's multiple places and ways that can be done as far as PD, in-center hemo, home hemo, or in the hospital. So I'm going to talk about in clinic dialysis. There's considerable amount of people on the floor when you come in, so it's like it's not that private, really. You got people sitting right next to you, a couple feet on either side. It's really kind of hard to explain what it's like to deal with everybody moving around, doing their thing. It's a very turn and burn situation. Turnover is quick. You got to get patients, or they got to get patients in and out. And get the next patient on, so it's kind of a rushed situation. You're dealing with the tech that's doing your machine, stringing the machine, and putting needles in and stuff, which I do my own needles at this point. And string my own machine, so that kind of alleviates some of the stress. But then the nurse has to come listen to you and listen to your heart and lungs and listen to your fistula, and they're supposed to be evaluating you, but really in reality it's kind of a quick turnover thing. So there's not a whole lot of actual evaluation at that point, because we got to get the patient on dialysis regardless. So unless they're like about to die and they got to go to the emergency room, then we're probably just going to document whatever's happening and put them on the machine. So like, what it's like coming into the clinic and being in a dialysis clinic is really hard to describe. Honestly, the best way that I can kind of describe it is like going back to high school, and you're just no longer in charge. You gotta raise your hand and ask the teacher if you can go pee, if you're lucky enough to still go pee. But yeah, so once you get on the machine, and by on the machine, I mean plugged in with your blood, plugged into the filter. You start filtering your blood. Like, you either have a fistula like this, mine's gotten pretty big over the years, that you can put needles into and plug into the machine, which I think I got some footage somewhere, so I'll see what I can dig up. And then you pump your blood through the filter. And then what you're doing as you pump your blood through the filter is you're removing, and in some case replenishing, certain electrolytes and things like for me, I might be low on calcium, so sometimes I could get some calcium. It's pretty rare. Most of the time we're just removing stuff. But one of the main things that we're removing is fluid. I tend to sweat my fluid out. I used to go pee a bit more up till about a year ago, And so now I am dealing with a bit more fluid retention. Most dialysis patients don't go pee at all, so they just swell up, and so you remove as much fluid as you can, and the body cramps depending on how much fluid's being removed, or blood pressure drops because all the fluid is being pulled out of the veins and the veins can't restrict. So it's this game about how much fluid can be removed. And before dialysis, you don't usually feel too bad because it's a slow change and your body gets used to it and you don't notice it. I try to be extra aware and honest about how I'm feeling, so I try to really pay attention to the depth of my lungs. I have pretty good lung function and pretty large lungs, so I can lose quite a bit of function before I start to actually notice. I'll just be moving a little bit slower and just a little extra grumpy that day because it's a little bit hard. Then when you go into dialysis, depending on how much of a change is going on, your body will respond, and usually it's not great. You end up feeling like your metabolism crashes kind of, and so you get really cold. You'll feel kind of like you got a mini flu, and you kind of can get a little mini flu, I guess. You can get nauseous and really cold and some fluid in your lungs, cough stuff up for a while and stuff, and got to get warm. These days I can maintain my diet well enough. I don't remove much fluid because I don't put on much fluid, or I sweat it off, and I get dialysis 4 days a week and a lot more dialysis than I did in the past. So I tend to feel pretty good before and after. I don't have a lot of changes, but out of 15 years, I'd say there's a handful of years that's really been decent like this, and a whole lot of difficult years. You reread the question and say, what is dialysis process like? What happens during dialysis and what happens before and after? I think I've pretty thoroughly answered that at this point. Thanks for checking out my Q&A. If you have any questions or comments, I definitely appreciate those. And if you got a little bit of time, please go check out some of my other fun videos.